A common complaint that we hear from in-service school leaders is that their training did not address understanding how adults grow and learn. These school leaders often struggle with trying to figure out how they can provide high-quality learning for the adults in their building. These are adults with different needs, different preferences, and different developmental orientations. In this presentation, we're going to explore the potential of 4 research-based pillar practices that are designed to facilitate growth and collaboration among the adults in your future schools. Drago-Severson, who you met last week, conducted a large research study with a diverse group of principals from a wide range of U.S. schools. As they analyzed the data from that research study, Dr. Drago-Severson and her fellow researchers at Columbia University Teachers College, they found that 4 distinct practices emerged across schools that demonstrated growth and effective collaboration. Those 4 distinct practices were teaming, providing leadership roles, collegial inquiry, and mentoring. These 4 pillar practices can not only support transformational learning, but create and hold up a foundational infrastructure that would constitute the basis for a learning-oriented model of school leadership. While we will explore each of these pillar practices one by one in this presentation, in reality, in practice, they are both distinct and interconnected. Each pillar practice involves adults collaborating in growth-enhancing and meaningful ways. Each of the pillar practices we're going to explore have the potential to help you as future leaders, help you to create structures for adult collaboration. They also have the potential to help us actually get better when we do collaboration. I do want to emphasize, however, the point of developmental intentionality that undergirds each of these practices. Presented as they are here in this presentation, these practices are directly informed by Kegan's constructive developmental theory and need to be connected to the unique cultures in which they're implemented. Most of us already collaborate extensively with each other and with others, in a technical sense, and sometimes with mixed results. So mandating collaboration may not necessarily improve the quality of our work together. As one high school teacher commented to me recently, calling a meeting a professional learning community does not necessarily make it a professional learning community. The same holds true with pillar practices. As we progress through this presentation, I'm going to ask you to think carefully about how you are already collaborating, and then build upon and within these structures to reach new connections and higher levels of true collaboration. Please understand that this developmental approach to collaboration is not about adding more work to the already overfull plates of teachers and school leaders. It's more about engaging in the same work a little differently. A few little shifts could be powerful and could potentially reshape our collaborative structures into developmental holding environments. Implementing pillar practices with developmental intentionality may enable school leaders to honor and attend to adults' developmental diversity. It can keep at the forefront the knowledge that we all make sense of our experiences in different ways, and therefore we will all need different forms of support and challenge in order to increase our internal capacities. Teaming can be a great way for adults to help each other learn. In teams, adults have opportunities to more fully understand and question their own and others' beliefs, assumptions, and the values that guide instructional and leadership practices. Teaming can also decrease isolation, improve communication, engender innovation, and promote a more collective approach to leadership and supervisory processes. Teaming often focuses on team teaching, forming leadership teams, examining student work, examining teacher practice, leadership challenges, and/or even working on reform or improvement initiatives. It can be a space where educators challenge and stretch each other to consider alternative viewpoints, to test and revise assumptions. Just in general, learning to consider others' viewpoints can help broaden perspectives. The benefits of teaming apply to district-level leaders, principals, assistant principals, teachers, curriculum leaders, coaches, essentially all the adult stakeholders. And yet, as you may have experienced, teaming is not always easy. We do know when a good team is working when we see it or we experience it, just as we know when we're on a team that doesn't quite click. But figuring out why can be a challenge. Researchers for Google's Project Aristotle set out to study and support effective teams. They were looking for a combination of personality types or characteristics that would optimize teamwork. However, as those researchers dug through decades of company data, they found no particular formulas or recipes for an excellent team. As the leader of the project explained, "At Google, we are good at finding patterns, but there were not any strong patterns here." Although Project Aristotle was not able to pinpoint the composition for an optimal team, they did learn that team norms and culture seem to make the biggest difference in terms of a team's productivity and effectiveness. There were somewhat similar results reported in the research of psychologist Anita Williams-Woolley. She and her colleagues found out that the collective intelligence of a team emerges most strongly when the group members share a high average of social sensitivity and an equitable amount of conversational airtime. The findings from these and other studies seem to point us back to the vital role of culture and preconditions. In addition, this work seems to echo and illuminate how feeling well held, in terms of a holding environment, on a team matters. Amy Edmondson is a professor at Harvard Business School, and her research suggests that the importance of what she calls psychological safety is key for adults who work on teams. So what does it really take for adults to feel psychologically safe? How might our different ways of knowing shape our experience and expectations when part of a team or collaborative endeavor? I would encourage you to follow the link on this slide. It'll take you to a New York Times article that provides a much more in-depth discussion of the research I'm just barely touching upon here. Let's explore these underlying and often invisible dynamics related to the importance of recognizing and attending to developmental diversity in teams. This table on this slide offers an overview of developmental supports and challenges for teaming that may be benefit to adults, especially since we know that adults have different ways of knowing. For example, instrumental knowers will be most concerned with the rules of collaboration, and they will need explicit guidelines about team procedures, goals, and norms. Being transparent about these types of elements can be helpful to these adults and, quite frankly, to all the colleagues on a team. Encouraging instrumental knowers to consider multiple pathways for successful collaboration will help them to move towards their growing edges and to stretch. For socializing knowers, feeling safe and accepted on the team is of primary importance. It is critical to acknowledge their interpersonal needs and to affirm their feelings. It will be important that they know, when and if a criticism is offered, that it is offered in the spirit of improving the team's work and not aimed at them as individuals. Because socializing knowers tend to adopt the standards and propositions of value to colleagues and supervisors, it can be helpful to gently challenge them over time to look within and share their honest thinking and feeling with their teammates. When we look at self-authoring knowers, teaming is often a welcome opportunity for them to demonstrate their competency and expertise. Because these knowers have grown the internal capacities to engage in conflict without feeling risk, they may not recognize how their confidence or sense of vision influences other members of the team. Here, learning about constructive developmental theory may actually help self-authoring knowers to engage intentionally and effectively with colleagues who have different orientations or different ways of knowing. For example, when taking on a leadership role in a team or when offering critical feedback to teammates, it's important for self-authoring knowers to have an awareness of their own and others' ways of knowing. This may help them to better deliver messages, supports, and challenges. Essentially, they need to learn how to meet colleagues where they are. In fact, this kind of heightened awareness can help self-authoring knowers to take a greater perspective on their own thinking, acting, and leadership. Similarly, knowledge of constructive developmental theory can help self-transforming knowers to more intentionally strive for and achieve interconnection on a team, providing them with a lens to better understand, to better manage, and to better lead the complexities of change and collaboration. Essentially, sharing hopes and expectations for our team experiences and making explicit the developmental intentionality behind the work can help all adults to learn from each other's diverse strengths, perspectives, and collective expertise. The second pillar of practice, providing adults with leadership roles, is yet another way to help teachers and other educators to lead the work of the school and expand their internal capacities. Assuming a leadership role allows people to share in leadership, exercise authority, and grow their expertise. From a developmental perspective, when a leadership role is offered to a person, someone else is there to facilitate growth by offering supports and challenges. This scenario can create a fertile holding environment. Just as with teaming, this type of intentional collaborative work can help adults better understand their own thinking and their own underlying assumptions. However, providing adults with leadership roles takes time. It takes a great investment of care, but it's often well worth it. Offering leadership roles with developmental intentionality can be powerful, not only in building the capacity of the individual, but of the organization as a whole. You want to remember, though, that providing a leadership role is a process, not an event, and it's one that has the potential to help adults grow their internal capacities, provided they receive developmentally appropriate supports and challenges. Providing leadership roles is distinct and very different from distributive leadership because of the developmental intention that's involved. When it comes to offering leadership roles, they can be small or they can be large. No matter the size, the key is to consider the developmental match between the person and the role. It's not as simple as divvying up the available roles or having potential leaders blindly reach into a bag and pick out a role. It is critical to be intentional about matching the colleague's strengths and growing edges in relationship to the leadership role, as well as the leader's capacities and preferences for offering support. A leadership role would not be a good developmental support if it is too far beyond that colleague's capacity to take it on successfully, or if there are not adequate supports available. For example, you would not invite a socializing knower to lead a contentious meeting or debate without practice and backup. However, you might invite this same socializing knower to co-chair such a session with you, preparing the talking points together and debriefing afterwards. In the end, it might be simply the easiest thing to ask the colleague what supports might be more helpful. It may be simple, but by asking, "How can I help?" can be powerful, particularly when people feel they can trust the leader. And when they feel safe and supported, most likely they will answer you honestly. Understanding the ways of knowing can also give us a head start in our efforts to authentically support adults' growth in and through leadership roles. The chart on this slide offers an overview of the kinds of supports and stretches that may feel helpful to adults with different ways of knowing as they assume new responsibilities in leadership. As educators, when we think about reframing leadership roles in these new ways, we may experience an aha moment. One aspiring young leader recently noted, "I love the difference between providing leadership roles and distributing leadership. Now I'm thinking about how my school can shift the focus from getting things done to giving teachers opportunities to take on roles and engage in activities to help them grow." For some leaders, it has been historically hard for them to let go of the reins and to ask for help. Instead of opportunities to check off simple tasks, they simply are thinking of leadership roles now as an opportunity for colleagues to grow. That completely reframes the whole idea. The pillar practice of providing leadership roles puts us and our leadership capacities on the hook. Effectively providing adults with leadership roles requires first that we ourselves have the internal capacity to stand behind and beside our colleagues as growing professionals, and a willingness to open ourselves up to the vulnerability and possibility of our own growth and change. In the end, if we can authentically support and challenge the leadership of those around us, and if we can authentically model inclusiveness and sensitivity, then we can all lead together. The third pillar practice of collegial inquiry is really a form of reflective practice. However, it is very distinct from the traditional kinds of reflective practice in that, as the title suggests, we cannot engage in collegial inquiry alone. This involves educators caringly and intentionally coming together to explore important aspects of their work. Collegial inquiry adds a qualitatively different and developmentally informed layer to this important approach to learning. Although we can reflect privately about our work at most any time, collegial inquiry is a collaborative enterprise and can offer unique advantages for growth. After all, no matter how hard we reflect on that lesson we taught today or that conversation we had with a parent, we can only know what we know and see what we see through the lens of our own experience and our own way of knowing. However, engaging in collegial inquiry can help all of the participants to broaden their thinking with the goal of enhancing instructional and leadership practices. In fact, this particular pillar invites each of us to consider a whole new world of possibilities because considering others' perspectives helps us not only to expand, but also to better understand our own thinking. This kind of perspective taking is one of the most powerful ways we can support change and improvement in our schools. It helps us as adults to look beyond the surface behaviors towards the underlying and often unconscious thinking that guides our actions. It has the potential to help us build our internal capacities in mutually beneficial and reciprocal ways. The leaders studied in L. Drago-Severson's research employed collegial inquiry in collaborative decision-making, problem-solving, conflict resolution, and so on. Many of those leaders structured a wide range of meetings, whether they were faculty, department, team meetings, or supervisory ones, to facilitate collegial inquiry around teachers and leaders' instructional practice or leadership, student work, school and district goals, initiatives. Others formed study groups or scheduled peer observations to examine problems of practice, to enhance planning instruction, or to pilot new initiatives. We do need others to understand and see into ourselves and into our practices more clearly. And we do need to feel the security and the preconditions of safety, trust, and respect to open ourselves more fully to new learning. When engaging in collegial inquiry, it is important to remain mindful of how our own and others' ways of knowing will influence our expectations and experiences. It may be very helpful to engage in honest conversations about the supports and challenges that would feel most meaningful to all participants. It can also be helpful to think about how adults with different ways of knowing might orient to this particular pillar practice of collegial inquiry. The table on this slide offers an overview of the key developmental supports and challenges that may help leaders to scaffold collegial inquiry for adults who make meaning in different ways. If approached with this type of developmental intentionality, collegial inquiry has the potential to be a mutual gift that educators give to one another. Living norms that we revisit and we check in on and adjust as needed can also be an important support here. These mutual agreements, added to an explicit discussion of confidentiality, can be of particular value in collegial inquiry. In any event, adults with different ways of knowing will need different supports and challenges. For instance, if we're looking at a goal-setting process, instrumental knowers will assume that the supervisor knows what the right goals are and should simply tell them. Leaders in this situation might want to support growth by offering example goals and encouraging these adults to move towards more abstract goals. In addition, providing step-by-step directions to achieve goals would be an appropriate support here. Socializing knowers expect that someone in a position of authority knows what the best goals are for them. And while these knowers generate some goals internally, they need to be encouraged to voice them and perhaps eventually separate them from the goals of others. Self-authoring knowers will form their own goals, but they can be challenged to grow through a process that helps them to be less invested in their own goals and able to look at a variety of alternatives. One particular strategy or protocol for engaging in collaborative inquiry and connections is the developmental process of convening. This is a collaborative, developmental, and case-based approach to examining problems of practice. It's a way to safely and collaboratively explore puzzling dilemmas. The goal of a convening is not necessarily to answer a particular question or come up with immediate solutions. Rather, the objective is to carefully consider alternative perspectives that can gently stretch our thinking. In fact, you will have an opportunity to engage with convening cases in the discussion board activity this week. Mentoring, the fourth pillar practice, is a far more private and relational approach to supporting growth. It may arguably be the oldest form of collaborative adult development in the world. Mentoring is an increasingly common form of supporting leadership in school systems since it offers educators at all levels the opportunity to share expertise and responsibilities. When approached with developmental intentionality, participating in a mentoring relationship is an opportunity for both partners to broaden perspectives, examine assumptions, and share knowledge. Mentoring and its closely related practice of coaching with developmental intentionality, could include pairing veteran teachers with newer ones, inviting faculty with particular expertise to work with colleagues, and so on. Mentoring can also meet organizational needs, such as initiating new community members, spreading know-how and expertise, transmitting and reinforcing the organizational mission, providing emotional, professional, or supervisory support to educators within and across the system. One of the keys to structuring an effective mentoring program is the fit between the mentor and the mentee, as well as the developmental supports and challenges that they may each need to grow and learn in this mentoring relationship. Looking at this through a developmental lens can help us to avoid some common pitfalls and turn more towards promising strategies for mentoring relationships. For example, research supports the effectiveness of inviting rather than requiring teachers to serve as mentors, of accounting for developmental diversity when we create the mentoring pairings, differentiating the feedback and the mentoring interactions, supporting mentors to take on these new roles, and recognizing the value of mentoring for all, not just new educators or struggling educators, but the advantages for all. The way in which adult learners engage in mentoring practices, or for that matter, any form of collaborative work, is going to vary according to how they make sense of this experience. As we've said over and over again, we're looking at their ways of knowing. So, thinking about sharing constructive developmental theory with both mentors and mentees, that may be helpful to their understanding and their expectations for work together. Our ways of knowing can and do influence the kinds of supports and challenges that will help us grow. For example, instrumental knowers will feel supported by mentors who help them meet their concrete needs and goals with step-by-step procedures. Over time, however, a mentor can support growth in an instrumental knower by encouraging the mentee to move beyond what she or he sees as the right goals or the right way to do things and nudge them towards engaging in open-ended discussions about alternative and perhaps even more abstract goals. A socializing knower will feel generally best supported when a mentor gives explicit acknowledgement of the importance of that knower's beliefs and ideas. Feeling supported by mentors will enable these adults to take greater risks. Mentors can gently support a socializing mentee's growth by encouraging him or her to voice their own perspective before they learn about other people's perspectives. And finally, self-authoring knowers will feel best supported by mentors who enable them to learn about diverse perspectives and help them to critique and analyze not only their own but also their mentors' perspectives and goals and practices. Mentors can encourage these self-authoring adults to move away from their investment in their own philosophy in a way that will help them not to feel internally conflicted. To help you ground the pillar practice of mentoring in an authentic setting, I want to share the experiences of an assistant principal by the name of Blair. Blair was working to reimagine the teacher induction program at her school. The administration traditionally requires all department heads to serve as mentors for incoming faculty. However, Blair is going to share here, through my words, her rationale for rethinking that traditional approach. As Blair said, some of our mentors are outstanding, just out of this world, but others would prefer not to be involved. I really understand that. I mean, people have all kinds of responsibilities in and out of school, and mentoring takes a lot of work and a lot of time. Still, it's so hard for everyone when a mentor checks out or is only halfway involved. On top of this, I'm realizing that we've only ever matched people by role. So math teachers work with math teachers, science teachers with science teachers, and so on. But since we're such a small school, that sometimes left us with pairings that don't seem quite right, personality-wise. I'm realizing now that focusing our mentoring on the people instead of their positions would make a big difference. I'd like us to move into a more of an opt-in approach for getting mentors involved. Now, unfortunately, in situations like this one, we don't always have the information we need ahead of time to match people. But Blair makes a good point in terms of matching people versus roles. Particularly when we are working to pair up adults that we don't know yet, there's no quick and easy method for diagnosing ways of knowing. That may be a good thing. And as the Google team in the Aristotle project experienced, their whole experience underscored the fact that there is no absolute formula for ensuring the best matches in collaborative work. So we only can do the best that we can do. However, I will say, I have to share that Dr. Ellie Drago-Severson and her team have been collecting some anecdotal data, and they found that people can serve most effectively as mentors when they do not have to reach up too high. Necessarily, I guess what we're talking about is no more than one halfway of knowing to meet their mentees developmentally. For example, if I have a mentor who makes meaning firmly and solidly with a socializing way of knowing, that person would have the capacity to effectively support a mentee who makes meaning with an instrumental way of knowing, or perhaps even a mentee who is just beginning to develop self-authoring capacities, one who's in the early transition from socializing to self-authoring. However, it would be very, very challenging for this socializing mentor to effectively support or solidly challenge a self-authoring or self-transforming mentee. Teaming, providing leadership roles, collegial inquiry, and mentoring can serve as pillars of collaborative leadership, positive culture building, creator perspective taking, and continuous learning. These research-based practices can and should be used synergistically and in combination in order to build capacity throughout the organization. Mentors, for instance, clearly also occupy leadership roles and often engage in collegial inquiry with their mentees. Members of teams, on the other hand, can dedicate time to collaborative reflection and can take on and share different leadership roles to keep their teams running smoothly. The big idea here is to fill collaborative structures with developmental intentionality so that they authentically reflect the preconditions and serve as a safe holding environment for growth. We need to fill and refill our teams, mentoring relationships, and all collaborative endeavors with genuine care, developmental understanding, and a deep commitment to the value of this work.